当然这个上来跟这里啊，一切被点把结果的事情，第一个是对当然这个来，这个其他来这个其他上班的来来给别出单，那你来票哇塞，来马切巴来米切巴来切巴去米烧哇事情，当然这个东西来来给别是的，这个的，电话其中可能前辈那样有，给我给未来了点给法的是。马多那给未来了，等于就话马多没给未来了，电话起床看也重要性全要马来事情。那第哪些呢？那没给未这错话动啊，可能起床可能起白那呀，这加上呢，就安那没给未来了，等于就话的马多呢，给未来了，等于给未来了，等于动啊就早给要马来，加上等于现在的。동안 간데시 네 그런 유 아니 미가와 직사 발을 중앙 이바 다 쳐발레스 개발레스 니 대와 간데시 네야 아니 그런 유 개베레시 사데 개베레레 중앙 이바 다 쳐발레스 개발레스 가상도 디고 나도 시바레다.
Good morning. So last night we started to look at the presentation on karma and its results. And the first part of the text that we look at presents karma in accordance with 4 divisions. So the purpose of these 4 divisions is for one to come to gain a good understanding for the foundation of the principles of cause and effect. So we saw that, we started to look at the first of the 4 outlines yesterday, and that is that karma is certain. What we will now soon come to look at are the others. The karma greatly increases, that you do not meet with karma that you have not created, and the karma that you have created does not dissipate. So of those, we looked at part of the first, that karma is certain. So what this presents is that happiness that we all wish to experience and suffering which we all wish to be free from, both of these are results. They come about independent on causes, and not any causes, they're respective causes. That the causes that result in happiness are virtuous. The causes that result in suffering are non-virtuous. And this is certain or definite, in that when one accumulates virtuous causes, these, when they ripen, can only ripen in happiness. And likewise, when one accumulates non-virtuous causes, it is definite or certain that these can only ripen in suffering. And this is the case for even the mildest form of happiness or the slightest form of suffering, up to the greatest forms of happiness and the mildest forms of suffering, the greatest forms of suffering, all come about independent on causes. So the outcome of that one strives to come to in this specific point is to, by recognizing the certainty of karma, that one abandons the accumulation of all non-virtue, including slight non-virtue, no longer excusing slight non-virtue as not mattering, but recognizing that non-virtue can only lead to suffering. And correspondingly, striving to accumulate virtue at every opportunity, recognizing that these are the causes that will lead to happiness.
준제 겸마초와 소소를 준비래 레쟁이 예전남 밀루와라 네바니 상기에 탐제기 양다베 따와셔바 가르비 취 탐제기 시르나바오스.
We'll continue where we concluded last night, which is on page 120, the second point, second sub-outline in this outline of that karma is certain. And just to say again, we aren't able to produce little booklets anymore, so the text is available for purchase in the shop. So reading from the book, therefore happiness and suffering do not arise without cause or from an incongruous cause, such as the fundamental nature or isvara. happiness and suffering in general arise respectively from virtuous and non-virtuous karma in general. Also, the specific instances of happiness and suffering each arise individually from the various specific instances of the two types of karma without the slightest inconsistency. To gain certainty with regard to actions and their effects being certain and infallible is said to be the correct view of all Buddhists and praised as the foundation of all virtuous phenomena.
Dene songa gyumsen dene inza di chiri sayadi disore. Dene gyumsen inza da manzo dedu dewa da dunga sayadi yakane sine gyume bala kiawa mares. Chidan gyudan kienla dene kiawa re mado gyume bala kiawa mares. Dedu nam gyume dang sayadi.
This outline, which is the explanation for the being for this being the basis of all virtuous phenomena, starts with the word therefore. So therefore always indicates that it's pointing to reasoning that preceded. And the reasoning was that happiness, like suffering, both are results that come from causes. And whether we talk about happiness and suffering as being slight or extreme, it comes from causes. So here, now Lama Tsongkhapa writes, therefore happiness and suffering, so again both, do not arise without a cause. So resultant happiness and suffering are not causeless. They do not come about randomly, but they come about independent on causes and specific causes. These, the causes of happiness are called virtuous, and the causes that result in suffering are because of that result are called non-virtuous.
Dewa Kandashine, Gula Tini Gigrimato, Gumeba Mares, Dunga Kandashine, Gula Tini Gigores, Gumeba Mares, Gula Tini Gigores, Dunga, they do them Gumedans, Gumeba Mares. Zada Dini and Zada, Gumeba Gigres like Sures, and the Chiro Yangpemba says your mean Yangpemba, Disugeda, Guyo Mares, Gumela Kiavares, Koran, Guyo Yomares order. She's not got Dini and Zada. Gume said, Giva Duba inside it, Gumela Giva, now big that she had Gumeva Giva killing Goma Guda, Gala dinner, Esma, the Gumeba Giva Mares somewhere. It's natural Yamba, but the Gumeba Giva, Guyo Mares, and around to this or the bear on the bear, Bella Shad, Singing Sama no water, Shorwa, Sama no water, so I can't Guyoma, this is Corno Gumeba Givares, and Lucian could bear a charge and somewhere once.
So again, the happiness that we desire comes about independent on causes. Happiness is not causeless or random, and so too the suffering which we want to avoid. Suffering too comes about independence on its respective causes. It is not causeless or random. So this needs to be addressed because there are those who believe that happiness and suffering, for example, or there are those that believe there are those who do not assert cause and effect, saying that things happen without cause. For example, there's an ancient non-Buddhist school who point to a thorn and say, this thorn, the sharpness of this thorn, it has no cause. So this is an illustration which they present as evidence that things come about randomly or without cause.
dine chirubi dus chine konzugi dus gyumele kyawa killing or chisanganzu nangbege da dido kanishine gyudan kyenle dine kyawa gyumele kyawa mare ese chisan gyume ba kyawa manse sungwa gyumsendire.
In not these non-Buddhists in not accepting cause and effect, this will include, therefore, if as they do not accept cause and effect, they therefore also do not accept future lives. They say when we die, when this body loses its vitality, we cease. Then this they illustrate through, if you take a piece of paper that has a drawing on it, a picture on it, if you burn that piece of paper, the drawing is also lost. So likewise, when death comes, then the continuum ceases or consciousness ceases. There is no rebirth. So there are those who do not believe in cause and effect, who do not believe in rebirth. Therefore, it needs to be addressed here that happiness and suffering come about independent on causes.
And let's all say this, and so does it. And Chiruba Desenjigi, and Chisa, and the Deduxia, and the Semja, and Mida, the Nick Chasa, and the Chigi. Jizo says your rest, Tigi, Numgures, or Diba, Jubitumanas, Numgures, Chizogi, Numguremato, and it Nanzugi, Les, and Nazin, the Sungo Machesada, Chazan, Jabba, Jizo says your rest, Chazan Chizogi, Numgures, says Sungo. Chazan Dineza, Chiro, Dineza de Ralugi Deduxia de Chizogi, Chizo Latine, Javama, Chizogi, Javamare, says Sungo.
And the text continues.
So said it.
So then the text, so we go, as always, go in the order of the Tibetan. So, such as fundamental nature or Isvara, incongruous cause such as fundamental nature or Isvara. So this again is presented because these are the views that some non-Buddhists hold. That's the fundamental nature. It's often translated as the general principle that that this or a god such as Isvara, they create things. It does, or that creates things. It does not come about independent on causes, but rather from a god such as Isvara, or from this fundamental nature or general principle, primal matter. It's from that things come, not from causes.
And in a Yanjiki, Chiruba Desenjigi, Garsons, the Wanchugi, La Wanchu said, Wanchugi, and about Jubaris, Wanchugi, Madus in the Guebats, because of that Korongi, Ma, the new Guebat, which is, Chesna, Anzuki, Lesa, Devanoyada, Anzuki, Kawasa, Devanoyada, Le, Miwas, Tiponoa, Gudan, Shanchel, Tuna, two girls said, the member, Honzugeta, Ma, Wanchugi, Ma, Chima, Dustin, Devanoyada, Dunga, this Chasa, Wanchugi, or as to Sungo, Dinner, Zada, Anzuki, Delea, and then. So the Wanchugi, my inside did it, Gudan, Rang, Sosoki, Soso Rangi, Gudan, Gewata, Gewasa Paladin, Division, Soso Rangi, Migawasa Paladin, Chibu Dunga Younger Mado, Shandachi, Anzoya, Sosokaya, Machebashi, Shandachi, Dunga, the Devati, the Bares, Wanchu, there was a Wanchu Gonzo, Killing the Garswell, Wanchu, Sosochi Mod, Wanchu Gien, Ma, Devatia, the Dunga, the Chasa Wanchu, Chevares, the Mare SS. I want you didn't go, but I want you to say, want you to that. Tamjigi Jebo, want you to say, one, I want you to dig it, go, said, Zemlida, Mida, Semje, Dundro, Deducte, and Chasa, the want you to be your assessment.
Isvara is an illustration of a creator god. So there are certainly those who have the belief that a creator god, such as Ishvara, bestows happiness on some and suffering upon others, or sometimes bestows happiness, sometimes bestows suffering. So this is the view of some, whereas of some non-Buddhists, whereas Buddhists will not accept this. Buddhists assert that the causes we create result in, if those causes are virtuous, happiness. If those causes are non-virtuous, suffering. They are not bestowed by some external entity, but the results of happiness and suffering come about independent on the causes that we create.
제산다 지금 고법을 되게 그런 쪽에 도수 시는데 지 그런 쪽 템바디디 마 고바데 제바레 사실 송거로와데 안디니게 다 속나데 된다 소유바지 되네 미팀비규를 중요한 말이에요. 규디 답변에 대화세야디 그런 거 팀비규를 중요하다 미팀비규를 중요한 말이에요. 동화시에 대한 그런 팀비규를 미팀비규를 중요한 말이에요. 제산데 대화디 레 개화데 텔레티네 동화 중요한 말 제부 동화 중에 제산 거 미팀 말이에요. 그래 유미 제부나 균이 미팀 말 규를 지금 말했어요. 네 말다 대조다 왕주다 다는 속세데 미팀비규를 세데 남보 망고도와데 왕주를 겨와 규메발에 겨와 말해 조에 겨와 말해 왕주에 제와 말해 아니 디라는 아니 규를 끼워도 미팀비규를 끼기를 미팀비규를 겨와 말해서 배는 하나 저기 제지 끼워이나 제부 유sab은 제지 따발에 되네 거 제기 얼마도 드라마 답네 제부 아니 가서래 제기 말했어 아니 디네 대시 제상 그런 게 유튜브 규시 때문에 델레테네 제부 중고를 마도 유튜브 규시를 제부디 야 미팅 봐줘요 말했어.
Could change English a little bit here? Therefore, happiness and suffering do not arise without a cause, such as the fundamental nature or Isvara, or from an incongruous cause. So, incongruous, or for me it's easier to pronounce a disharmonious cause, should come after this. So, it's more of a list that without a cause being one, and not from fundamental nature or svara as two, and then thirdly, an incongruous cause or non-harmonious cause. So this third part, incongruous cause, this says that results of happiness and suffering come from their respective causes, not from causes which are discordant. That's maybe better, incongruous or discordant cause. Because a cause that leads to happiness is necessarily, or it can only be, a virtuous cause. Suffering, which is a result, itself comes from a cause, and that cause can only be, necessarily is, a non-virtuous cause. So a incongruous cause would be if virtue somehow led to suffering, which is not possible.
개회다 미개회 레지레 대둑지 중국에서 개회 레라 아니 지다도 되게 중요한 대화 중요하다 미개회 레라 아니 동화 중요하래 해서 제상 개미개 레 지레 대둑지다서 지다는 도스네 시고다 개화래 되네 가리용어서 대화 용거래서 대화지 개회 레라 되네 용마도 미개회 레라 되네 말 미개회 레라 되네 미개회 레다 대화 주문 일이 미팅 바래서 제사디 미팅 비교를 좀 시작 말해서 지난시 동아시아디 미기웰레라 되는 중국어를 마도 대위 개위렐라 되네 아니 동아 중요해요 말해서 제사다 개위 레치레 대화 중요하다 지단에다 개위렐라 되네 가리용 것은 대화 용거를 해야죠. 다 미기웰레기 대보를 가리용 것은 동아 용거를 해야지. 도서.
In the first line we have that happiness and suffering do not arise from either causeless or from incongruous causes or from a fundamental nature or isvara. So how do happiness and suffering arise? The next sentence makes this abundantly clear. Happiness and suffering in general arise respectively from virtuous and non-virtuous karma in general. Virtuous karma necessarily ripens into experiences of happiness, and non-virtuous karma necessarily ripens into suffering.
디네 자다 된다라 가서 대화세디 유메발에 개와 말에스 유단 견라 되네 개와레스 직제 되네 왕주게 做왕주게 제셔봐做个是做的왕주게 소소 제모제 현다지게 봐做的왕주게 마 제셔봐 되네 말에스 소소라랑기 개वे레 레가르사바네 델레티니 개오레스 디오디 개오레스 미딘 비규레 개와 말에스 그래서 미튠바 게위레 사시 델레 미튠바 제부 동아디 용고 말레스 아니 미튠비교 미게와 사시 델레드는 제부 동아디 용고 말레스 데네 인자다 아나 가르레스네 대화세야디 랑기 유 왕초다 규메발라 말에 왕초도 조회 제바 마이바 소소라랑기 게위레 사바이나 델레 제부 동아 대화 지용거리에스 소소라랑기 네기 레 미게와 사바이나 디기 제부 동아리 용거리 에서지 나 디스모르다.
So therefore, what these two sentences show is that happiness is not causeless, nor is it bestowed by a creator God such as Ishvara or a general principle, what you have, a fundamental nature, nor does it come from a discordant or unrelated cause. Happiness, rather, comes from virtues, causes which are virtues. And so too with suffering. Suffering does not arise causelessly, nor is it inflicted upon us by a creator God such as Ishvara or a general principle or fundamental nature, nor from discordant causes. Rather, it comes from causes which are non-virtuous. So therefore, both happiness and suffering come from causes that we accumulate. All the happiness and suffering that we have ever experienced and ever will come from causes that we accumulate.
Yeah. 아도시네. 지단 데네 자다 도시네. 나 데니게 소요 되어서 된다라 가르스 고고르세네. 제사다 랑소소라랑기 두화세디 소소라랑기 냠렌진의 세고 받아 소소라랑기 디기주 소소라랑기 냠렌진의 디기주고 마도 소소 강제 먹어가지 샹다지기 근데 지지에 소소의 동화세야 말에 시행지기 제제랑기 랑기 제 먹어가지 디기주 랑 디기주야 말에 해야지 또 나를 지송고를 받아 제사다 소소의 동화세야디 소소라랑기 냠렌 제제 소소랑 배제 냠렌제 동화세고 그래 띵이 대화 주변에 대한 소소라랑 배제 냠렌 제제 근데 디기주고 그래 마도셔 즉 현代직구의 동화제야 다 디기주야 가요 말에 해야지.
This is something really to take to heart. This, especially for those of you who have long been in Buddhism, this will be very obvious. You will have heard this many times. But we need to counteract a tendency to think that things befall us or one just got lucky. Nor should one think that someone else inflicted a situation on you, bestowing happiness or suffering. Rather, every experience of happiness or suffering comes from causes we create. It's not the happiness and suffering we experience. It's not in the power of others, nor some random good or bad fortune, but rather are results that have come about from their own specific causes.
And dedugi kebar naso ba namja legi kebar naso les junse jama chowars jungare soso jungres. 제자들 dedugi kebar naso se kabri yang dewa chungchung je kabri dewa chimboya kabri dewa shukchimboya kabri dewa chungjoya kabri dewa gyunjingboneya kabri dewa chuksile meba charoya da denigi dewi kebar dunga inaya kabri dunga be masu shukchimbo 녀야다 가블리에 동아 되었마도 매바 이니 동아 되야 가블리야 동아 균주고 용거야다 가블리 동아 제라 녀모가 가제 양가마 가시 동아 녀시야 예르에 조르에 용거로와 제사 되니게 동아 나서 대와 캐버를 제부 대와 안에 대루 캐버 체중 캐버도 균ring력이 캐버 되니 쉬어봐다 니나신 제부 동아래야 안에 지게 동아 체중다 균형률다 되니게 캐버 나서 가지 용거로 와서 지산 디가르 제바래라나 단 귤에 된남게 레기 캐버스 나서 발레스 지산 귤레 캐버 나서 발레 되네 중화래서 지산다 동아 녀야게 귤레 슈체와 사바나 디제부 동아 슈체 영화다 균형보 영화 레기 뉴발레 되는 용거래 지산다 디나제 대화이네 대화 균체와다 균ring와서 되게 레기 개외레 뉴바 체션을 되는 기바 용거래 지다 레니 캐버나 소발레 기그레스.
Lama Tsongkhapa then continues. I'll just change the sentence in a couple of places. Also, the various specific instances of happiness and suffering each arise individually from the various specific instances of the two types of karma without the slightest inconsistency. What Lama Tsongkhapa is saying here is building on what has just been presented. So what's been presented is that happiness and suffering are not in the control of someone else, nor are they random, but they are results that come about independent on causes that we ourselves have created. And this is the case for every instance of happiness or suffering, whether it is slight or intense, whether it is fleeting in duration, or that it has a result that lasts for a sustained period. Whatever it may be, it has come about independent on its own specific causes. So therefore, those karmic causes which lead to this wide variety of results, because of the wide variety of results, we can see that both there will be a wide variety of karmic causes, but within that wide variety will also be a wide variety in terms of their strength. The more powerful a karmic imprint is that ripens, the more intense the result of either happiness or suffering, and the longer period, the more protracted period of time that result will last. The weaker the karmic imprint, the slighter the result of happiness or suffering will be, and that the result will be fleeting, as opposed to being for a longer period of time.
Dinashin Kyapal Bajarabina, Dini. Odusine, some Davina, Chizanko Penigi, Chaoyon Yudi, Shuk Gazeche, Dizzy Azula Sawa Shuche, Chaoyon, you Koron, Mekola, Nuba Church Madmena, and the Savi Dredi, Rat Chuma Madme. Koran Gundu never dene, and the Let's Hawa the Guni there. Kolamza Meva, Yogu Meva Chasona, then and the Savi Duma, Yogu Meva Chad. Odusine Bedina Shincheva, Dina Shinchene, the Kawakazi Shukcheva, and the Gunjinwiki, then in the Devotian, Nubachev Deva, Shukcheva, Deva, Gunja Yumores, like Gawa the Anjin, Nubashel Chicheva, Nuchunjun by the Menet in Deva, the Chunju by Young Mares, and Gawa the end, Gunjum by the Asma the Median, the Devotian, Kustimazo Rochas, or Dina Shinda, Migawa said, and Migawa Shukchambo, Gunjubucheva, and Jebu. Dunga de Shukchewa, Uniwaya. And the Negi Nuba Chunjuma, the Tipa Chunjum, much Majena, the devotee Dunga de Chunga. That devotee Lamsa and Zico, quite Pene, Semjili, Akanga, Lamsa, Deshavene, Tipa Chun, Des Matsago Martenza, Dunga de Kuxma de Yomo, the Negi Cabate, Gui Cabate de Yomares, Guida, Nuba Chishung. Yunjing Lugi, Cabra Naso Yoba Inza, Di Devotelaya, and the Nuba Chisho, the Yunjing Lu Cabra Yungo Essage.
So we see this played out in the material world. For example, a fire that is huge will be difficult to put out, and the intense heat that it creates would cause intense suffering for those in its vicinity. Likewise, a very small fire that will easily consume its fuel and be extinguished. So we see from the strength of the cause has an impact on the intensity and duration of the result. So this is important to take to heart in addition to what was presented previously, which is that all the happiness that we desire comes about independent on causes that we create. But not only that, the quality of the causes and the strength, namely the strength of the intent behind what one does, this makes a great difference. Likewise with suffering. That all the suffering that we experience comes about in dependence on non-virtuous causes we've created. And the intensity of that suffering, or that it's minor, as well as the duration, whether it's fleeting or whether it's over a protected period, this comes about in dependence on the strength of the karmic cause created. So this needs to be not just recognized, but taken to heart, that one needs to not only strive to accumulate virtue and abandon non-virtue, but the quality of the virtuous imprints one accumulates needs to be addressed as well. And moreover, where one recognizes one has engaged in some non-virtue, if that virtuous imprint was slight, caused some harm to others, but that harm was slight, then we know that result will be minor. But if the harm we caused was great, we know that the suffering that will be experienced will be great. And then so too with virtue. If one has developed a powerful motivation and engages in beneficial activities under that motivation, an incredible result will come. But if one is rather just going through the motions with some motivation, but it's just minor intent, then whilst a result of happiness will follow, it will not be nearly as large as it could have been if the motivation was so much stronger.
Diba migi village saban di debu and the chiki chowa ne the debu dunga majo de devar chungsona chowa sa debu majo ba ne chowa siro chisa dine mare debu dinji mi yongres chisa dine yong za da junse gyamajo tyesan kewa du mare gas gewa migi wa di le di shu chenbu che ne debu dunga de shu che yo ha ma do chung chung yo ha yo mare chisa dina shin da gewe le jene debu en chowa che dunga yo mare chisa da gewe shuk chenpo chi di debu chungchung yo mares. Tizanda gewa chungchung di debu chewa dine yo mares. Ko pa yuwa raya me da korong ge yu gande si sabi ne dele babi debu di dada chi yungu res. Tizanda mecho wa chungse ge mecho wa sosol chungwe ge sa jende soso dine chunggo res. Tizanda neza le de nge jen nam miluwa. Tizanda le de sa de den kewa res. Dunga gewa sana di debu 제가 땡켜 대화 중에 다 땡켜 버려. 유 미가 사나 디 대부 동아 요 땡켜 버려. 진짜 밀로 와래. 내제데 밀로 와래. 유학이네 요 말해야지. 제가 디네세 밀로 와래. 녀바니. 디네 삼다 제다. 다 레데세데 밀로 와 땡땡 레도 와 선배가 소수게 삼나래야. 다 녀바 타주 녀바니 고고래 해서래.
Just reading the sentence again. Also, the various specific instances of happiness and suffering, each arise from their various specific instances, each arise individually from the various specific instances of the two types of karma without the slightest inconsistency. This part of the sentence is similar to what was presented above, which is that from non-virtuous karmic imprints, only suffering can follow, and likewise, from virtuous karmic imprints, only happiness can follow. There is no inconsistency there. It is just not possible for virtue to lead to suffering and vice versa. Moreover, a powerful karmic imprint will lead to a powerful karmic result. Likewise, a minor, a small karmic imprint or a karmic cause will only lead to a far smaller karmic result. So here there is no inconsistency in terms of this projection from the type of cause to the type of result to be experienced. Then Lama Tsongkhapa concludes with, to gain certainty with regard to actions and their effects being certain and infallible is said to be the correct view of all Buddhists and praises the foundation of all virtuous phenomena. So gaining certainty with regard to actions and their effects This then is this particular outline that karma is certain. Certain, or the same word can be definite, so that one has no ambiguity in one's understanding that if a karmic imprint is virtuous, it can only lead to happiness. And if that karmic imprint is powerful, it will lead to a powerful and immense result, and vice versa. So they're gaining certainty of this. That, and it says further, that karma is infallible. Infallible is, or could be translated as non-deceptive. There is no exceptions in terms of sometimes virtuous causes can lead to suffering. That is not possible. Karma is certain or definite. And this is this correct view of all Buddhists, and praise is the foundation of all virtuous phenomena.
Dene zada Tsongkhapa 탐지 yang 대배 따와 셰바 가르쳐 탐지기 시르나바 오스데 Tsongkhapa 탐지 yang 대배 따와 셰바 가르쳐 탐지기 시르나바 오스 제가 Tsongkhapa 탐지에서 나바 Tsongkhapa 탐지기다 가르스네 yang 대배 따와세 지난 yang 대배 따와서 넘기면서 동유도배 따와라 고고 다데데 동유도배 따와시고 말 yang 대배 따와세데 레균제 대지다 le kewa chebala tene tebu dunga shungre le migawa chebala tebu dunga yungu ore chisanda di gyudela tene tebu dunga yoba dewala tene tebu dunga yungu yoba di yungre esebe ta chebe dawa ane chike dunga gande chine yu migawa chile yongare kigi ores chisanda dewa kan chechun gande sinan tebu kewa chile tene kigi ore chise miluware sedi chisanda le gyundi miluware ta chebare sebe denigi kelembe dawadida yangda be dawa le gyundi miluwa le gyundi ane chike ngeba re sebadi yangda ba kasan le tele tene tebu di chungwa di yangda ba da gyudi saji tebu di michungwa da yangda ba chagyo ba noto charu koro ba an gyu dewa sani di tebu dunga chuna chike dada chagyo ma chisanda denigi membaji yangda ba sidi gyu kewa la tene dewa chungwa di ta cheba de ki te gyu migawa la tene tebu dunga cheba ta cheba chisanda gyu dedu kanis sabe ne ki gedi kanis sabe ne di tebu dunga da di ta cheba re sebe da denigi samdana ngeba re ta cheba re sebe denigi samdana di dawa di kelinde da dawa di yangda be sangyi bene sangyi namba sangyi bege chisanda deshi sha di gyume ba la jewa zowa de jizuwe jeba wangchuge shen jewa jiden gupa be jeba re se memba je ati nawe sangye bigi da yudan yen deni chile deni chungwa de ta cheba re nge ba re senpe deni ki keilin be dawa di da yangda be dawa se di la go re de le gyun de nge ba miluwa ta chile keilin be dawa di yangda be dawa se deni ki dawa di da karche tamjigi shir nga ba wo se de chidan anda gewa 다 마주게 개위 냠는 가르치나 개위 양어 뭐 건데 그 탐지게다 시를 맞아로 시세를 뒤에서 따와디 여바인다 개와 야고사도 뭐 건데 개와 사야다 뭐 건데 저도 그래서 되니게 따와디 지금 마신 거다 한 먹고 있나 되니 개와디 야고지 냠는 여지 두 말에서 왔다
Looking so this will further this the second part of this final sentence is said to be the correct view of all Buddhists. Correct view of all Buddhists. Usually when we hear this term correct view, what will come to mind is the presentation on reality, the cultivation of the wisdom realizing emptiness. And this is the way this term correct view is usually utilized. But correct view has a second meaning, which is the meaning here, the correct view in relation to cause and effect. So the correct view of cause and effect has been presented here, as largely being presented here, which is that from causes which are virtuous, happiness and happiness alone will follow. From causes which are suffering, from causes which are non-virtuous, suffering and suffering alone will follow. Moreover, if those causes are slight or powerful, the result will be correspondingly slight or powerful. So this, and that there is no exceptions to this, that it is not infallible, it's not at all deceptive, that it is always like this. This is also part of the correct view. And moreover, that every experience of happiness or suffering comes about solely in dependence on causes we've created. We never suffer because some external being is inflicting suffering upon us, or this is just bad luck. Likewise, with happiness, it's not just all happiness. Any happiness we experience isn't due to good luck or being bestowed blessings by some other entity. Rather, this comes about in dependence on causes that we have created. So this then is the meaning of correct view here, the correct view of cause and effect. And it's praised as the foundation or the root of all virtuous phenomena. In other words, by having this correct view, one will turn away from what will lead to suffering and embrace what will lead to happiness. So later comes the presentation of what it is that one needs to adopt and what one needs to abandon. But the very foundation is this understanding here of the correct view of cause and effect.
Alright, that denige le kunje ngeba da denige ta choba yimba dene tawa de yanda ba tawa de ngang suzu gyure yena da gewa tamji gi en karche tamji shire se mit gewi je tamji shire se de 시제 교단 간에 교월에서 빼는 되네식 다 되네 디버 충주 제반은 디버 동아 용거를 SMB게다 타 쳐봐다 소소게 되네기 케일린베 따와 쳐봐네 디버 충주는 제게 zem그로와 어디 지금은 한 마오반에 디 동아 용거에서 디네게 지금 SMB 제사다 디버 가르지 네비 자와 디비 자와 가르치네 다 zem순 제의 용거를 다디 그래서 대 제반은 마오반에 디봉할 되는 용거를 SMB 제부 동아 줘봐 하고 그거 봐 하고 와서 제부 동아데 되게 봐서 제사다 니 제헬이야 아니 제메헬이야 아니 와 zem투야 용거 다지 개화로 지나 체중 가르치나 디제 어디 제부 디기 중국에서 하고도 하고 와서 따와 뒤에 와서 어디 디진 개화 추지 어디 제는 뭐 반응아 디기 용거에서 배 삼는자 디네는 개화 첨부 제야 나라 충주는 낭매도 마셔봐도 충주 제야다 근데 지금 첨부 제야를 배준 제야다 근데 네게 개발 연구를 해서 되는 인자다 가르치기 개화 탐지기 제사다 뇌세셔야 돼 샤니 동아 요약이 규리기 봐 zem바 인자 동아 용 zem비다 지도다 디 zem바딩 아주게 다 직전에 소 샤네 뇌치고 송화 수름선에 자루고 할게요 수름이 자루고 와게 봐 근데 내게 아직 개위 자와를 체조 가르치는 제반은 디티브 동아 용 디기 용바다 하고 해도 디를 제게 삼는 제바 되니 된바 대제바라 가와 준리리고와 어디네 이제 제사다 루시는 아주기 가르쳐 탐지게 개와 주위에 개위 냠는 탐지게 시설로 차고래진 배 야부래 나 봤음 디 되니게 따위에 삼다다 배 야부래 해야지 순고래 제가 봤을 때 뛰어가서 수고돼 되니게 삼다다 배 야부래 해야지
So that we have, or to what extent we have this correct view that of cause and effect, we need to look at within ourselves. And what should motivate us to look deeply within, look honestly within, is that Lama Tsongkhapa presents that this correct view is the foundation of all virtuous phenomena. In other words, it is the foundation that leads to the accumulation of virtue and thereby the experience of desired virtuous results or the desired results from virtue. So when I encourage you then to look inside to see how well you have embraced this correct understanding of cause and effect or this correct view of cause and effect. Because if you have merely understood it, it won't yet have been taken to heart. And this can be seen by how easily you turn away from slight non-virtue. If you have just or largely just understood this intellectually, it will still be a challenge to turn away or even perhaps notice slighter non-virtues. Likewise, the second way to analyze how well one has taken to heart this correct view of cause and effect is the ease with which one embraces all forms of virtue, accumulating not just what is substantial, but slight virtue, and accumulating it well. In other words, wholeheartedly, with attention and so forth. And to the extent that one has taken to heart this presentation of cause and effect, or the correct view of cause and effect, to that extent, one will abide easily within the restraint of ethics. And not only that, this abiding within ethics will be joyous. One will take great joy in refraining from what one knows will lead to suffering, and one will take great joy in embracing what one knows will lead to happiness. So therefore, to measure to what extent one has taken to heart the correct view of cause and effect, look at how easily you abandon slight non-virtue and how readily you embrace even slight virtue, and thereby how joyously one engages in ethical restraint. And it's because of the great result that follows from understanding this correct view that it is praised. We have the word here, praised, as the foundation of all virtuous phenomena. And it's praiseworthy because of the great result that this understanding of this correct view, that living in accordance with this correct view leads to, that it is worthy of praise.
언제기 디비기 디바사야데 망한체데 가브리엘가 저기 되차게 기왕게 디바사야다 견제 되네 가브리엘 콘트레 견제 망한체데 마시바 니스 마시바 하모과체 몽비기 마리비 왕게 디바지고라 제가 되네 자다 되네기다 양다베 따와리 근데 따와데 되네 세티 하고 바네 저기 남사 어디지네 디고 용거래 디지네 디바 디테부 동아 용거래 디지네 기아바 디테부 디기 용거래 셈베 삼토네 나 저기 디디과 보야다 숭 디고 마제 송야다 개위 냠는 제야리야 안지 디따와디 판도 연구가 반자다 에시나 바사 디니기 디따와디 야보레스 인게 사탐지기에 규리에서 송거로.
The vast majority of non-virtue we accumulate is motivated by this mind of attachment. This mind of attachment which arises so easily and in relation to so many phenomena. This is the primary motivating affliction behind the non-virtue we engage in. To a far lesser extent, there's the mind of anger or the ignorance of not knowing. These two, anger and the ignorance of not knowing or the ignorance of confusion, also lead to the accumulation of non-virtue, but is primarily that of attachment. So this ignorance of not knowing is where one lacks sufficient knowledge to recognize that this is non-virtuous and therefore should be abandoned, and that this is virtuous and therefore should be engaged in. So this is the ignorance of not knowing, it's a lack of knowledge. And anger is clearly recognized or clearly understood, but that of attachment, this is far more common because it arises so easily as a cause for non-virtue.
저기 that 제 지금 아주 강바 라와르 시현지 답된 나서지래도 세상을 저 가를 하고 그것은 나와다 하고 그래. 제가다 나와디 끼디 답교게 될 때는 중앙에 받아 하고도 그러와. 이나 동아녀 끼디 될 때 용어던 것도 뒤 하고 거 송거마도. 다 동아녀의 윤주님아 미가와지 제바디게 미가와 제바디가 하고 거마 띵거 송거마 하고도 제가 디네자 당한 줄이야 데리아 가르쳐 주고서는 아직이 되는 나저지 초와 동아 중요도 긴 답유기 긴 전에 연구할 때 이나 디 자유 연구 동아 연구에 디 그런 변에 레가마 미가 사요레스 레지요레스 디기 제부디 연구를 지금 거라다.
So if we experience some physical pain or illness, so we recognize that a particular part of our body is afflicted, and therefore we are experiencing some pain, some suffering. So this we can recognize. We can say this is wrong. Therefore, I'm experiencing this suffering result. But it's only at this most superficial of levels that we can directly recognize the relationship from this faulty limb, I'm now experiencing some pain. But where that illness or pain has come from is a karmic cause accumulated previously, probably in past lives. And that karmic cause would have been non-virtuous. It would necessarily or definitely have been non-virtuous. Therefore, when it ripens, will ripen into suffering. So that this illness comes from non-virtue. This is not something we can recognize as easily as which part of our body is out of harmony, and therefore we are suffering.
Pendat naza chikpa ine mingi naza chikpa ina kabri chik kashe gyogo chaya da kashe an gyunriwa menjue chida chikpa ina kashe gyunriwa gyogo chaya da kashe tues maa goya teso e korang ki gyuda kien liyor te nyama ki gyuge ta ile dene ki tebu chika le di satanga tone kyaba yungorwa kashe pene moda nala chikpa tuwa ina moda yang shio sona mang kashe shiwa da kashe kagosh majeba dene yungorwa chisang korang zui di kiengi nyama 레기 돈에 kiến 체벌 시에게 kiến 체벌에 대 이내 레디 마사 레디 매반사 레 데니 용고에 레 사매바서 직디 시고 말 직디 레 사바서 kiến 체진 좀 시루고 이내 지다지 데네기 다 kiến 차신 규 데네기 나서 주여 바라서 하모마도
Not only can we not recognize a specific karmic cause that has led to our illness, there's a tremendous variety in karmic causes that beings accumulate. And when one talks about karmic causes, one only can talk on a very general level, because of this variety of karmic causes that beings accumulate, they will experience similar results in very different ways. So for example, if several people are suffering from the same illness, their process of healing will be quite different. Some will heal very quickly, some will take a lot longer, and some may never heal. And this is because of the different karmic causes that are having an impact on each respective person. And likewise, in a car accident, from a certain type of car accident, someone will die, others will be injured, others will miraculously appear unhurt. And this difference comes about because of the specific individual causes that have led to this result, having great variety in there. So this is also an important point to bear in mind, just the wide variety of karmic causes that beings accumulate.
Dinigi le kunde samda jing baro chinye jiktu tusin le kunde miluware tende le dire sambike samlor changa tu dinigi samda ngeba nya de timbore chi keba ina tanga ju dunga ji cheba ine dizigi da semtele shira me chi ta dinigi samda jo tanga kanga che ben da yu to tanga kadi ta ganes ta de ja se be so so rana ge so so ya thonjo ta da semya sa ta ma sam kanga che de dinigi na se di yu yu kan le ya samna dana thone ane ji dunga kanga che che ta di thoshi ta ya da mara samga dini kanga che chi gorwa de dini le gyunde du san samya ko sta du sin jingi ni samda we da so so oda dingi gewang amege so su ge dini nyong le je sa di mingo res ya bo le da ga de dini da do ya bo yu ba da dini gi ne gap chile de min sha ba na mo ba na dini min mo ma mi ba yung gre che sa da 마음바다야 강아 체제 튕게 탑시 매한지레 미소바네 딜레 두아 차기로 와서베 삼다 딜레기 겨왕하면 레기 되고 민고래 섬지 달리 레기 민제다 딜레기 되고 레기 민지 레디 다루고래 미기 레디 조고래 섬베 섬다베는 아직 돼서 셈리아 강아 메바다데 괜지 직 메바 차소나데 야르로 와다 소소 강아 어디 괜지 메바 차소나야 마오바는 요 모아에게 차서면은 야가로 자교로 와디네 삼다वे는 소수게 삼리야 강한 중하다 이지이다 나제디 나제 강한 마도 소수게 삼을 당하 토네 나도 셈을 토양용하다 셈을 강한 배가 준 거래.
a further benefit of taking to heart this presentation on karma, again, not merely just understanding and accepting it, but that it impacts how you live your life, is that the way you experience karmic results will be radically transformed. So if we think of one person experiencing a particular illness in two different ways. So illness befalls them, they're struck down with illness. They can respond to that illness in two different ways. One would be, how awful this is, now I'm impeded in all the activities I have to do, I can't fulfill my responsibilities, my life is just so full of suffering, it's so unfair, this keeps happening to me, I'm sick again and again, and if I'm not sick, then it's something else that's going wrong with me, and I'm going to now have problems at my work, and my family are going to not be well looked after, and all these kinds of thoughts going on. So this person is just compounding the illness. The illness is of a specific level, but they are making the way they experience that illness vastly worse. Whereas if this person has taken to heart these teachings of karma, they will experience that same illness, because it's the same karmic imprint we're talking about for that same person. It will ripen, the illness will strike them, and immediately they'll recognize, oh, non-virtuous karma has ripened. This means that some harm that I caused in a past life, that I've carried with me into this life, has now matured. The karmic imprint has matured and ripened. And now I'm experiencing this. And they will look at this experience of suffering, or they will experience this suffering in a more detached manner, recognizing all that this suffering is that has arisen in the mind is a ripening of an imprint. That's all. Moreover, this non-virtuous karmic imprint that I've been carrying with me has now ripened. It's being exhausted. Fantastic. It is now one less suffering that will potentially hit me in the future. It is now being exhausted. So this is a very different way to experience the same ripening effect. It's a way that is not taking it personally, not seeing it as something inflicted upon you, but recognizing, but in a detached manner, recognizing it's just a suffering experience that has ripened. It's now just a particular karmic imprint that has ripened, nothing more. And actually, that is ripening now and being exhausted in this way is fortunate. I will never have to experience this imprint again. It's gone. So this is how a person who has taken this presentation to heart will experience suffering.
Denegi, 제가 denegi le 균제 되게 또 쓰는 게 아니에요. 되면 제 전시 semba 다시 냠지기 로 냠는 지gen 되게 denegi 삼다에 제사다 랑게 denegi 나스 쇼베네 셰 셈젠다 denegi 동아 그 미가와사 동아 용어사 유 사시 사시네 미가와치 디 대부 동아 용고야기 다들 맘미마치 용고야기 대부 동아 빠르메 봐 예디게 다들 용어신 바인데 예디베 denegi 삼단다 대소 닝제 삼베기다 denegi 대부 동아 용고 닝제 삼베 닝제기네 안 denegi 대부 다 닝마 셈제 샨다기 디바 사시베 대부 다 맘미바디게 나다 네이디레 나려야 주미야다 민신비기 동아디게나 출래 소소래 출래 저 콘솔이야 지도시네 동아 용모야 삼나다야다 어찌 어도시네 다시 냠지기 로샤드 제사 디니게 자 삼다야 용고로 봐다.
If you take this presentation to heart, you will experience this benefit that when suffering arises, instead of compounding that suffering by getting frustrated and annoyed at this inconvenience in your life and your bad luck and the rest of it, your mind will be light, detached from this problem, not at all overwhelmed by this suffering, and that will make your experience of the suffering so bearable. And this then is the foundation that is required for later to engage in the training of equalizing and exchanging self with others that bodhisattvas engage in. So bodhisattvas have a genuine or a sincere wish to experience the suffering of others. And they do so for two reasons. One is their incomparable compassion for others, desperately not wanting their kind mother sentient beings to suffer, and having the strong determination to do all they can to help others not to suffer, including experiencing the suffering themselves. So this is the power of their compassion. The second cause for them sincerely wanting to take on the suffering of others is their knowledge that they can handle it. Because for a long time, every suffering experience that has ripened for them, they've dealt with it fine. And they recognize they can take on a lot more. It is not so hard for them. They can see how others compound their suffering by their unskillful way of thinking about it. This practitioner's bodhisattvas long overcome that. They know they can deal with far more than they are experiencing. They can take it on. And in this way, they actually do want to experiencing the suffering of others because one, of their compassion, and two, they know they can handle it.
어두스네 디서 동화 단내 유수비 나는 차르고 제가 되네서 제가 갑리랑도 동화 기에도 디리안에 소소리아 셈마기와 추 강아지도 셈 추서 쇠마도 와라 제가 되네게 다데 삼다에도 다 이님의 얘기 되버리 다 민주고 다 마음바다 민 용모가 차야돼 지샤 셈베게 대세 셈마추 버시 셈 hö신시 되도 버와 제가 다 되네게 삼도 동화 단내 유수바 소소게 되네게 토한다 땅이 되네게나 데네 동안 나그도 삼정에 개변 냠는 제디 마샤기메 SMP 삼다지 되는 지연도 동안 단행 유세 봤 냠는 나는 조쇼서와
And again, taking this this presentation on karma to heart will radically improve your practice of patience. Because when one then experiences something unwanted, whether it's from something material or something or from others, whatever it may be, you recognize that this is just a ripening of your karmic imprints. That's all. And relating to it in this detached manner is very far from how ordinary people do, who they get frustrated and annoyed because they are overwhelmed by what is actually just an experience of suffering. So a skilled practitioner has taken this presentation on the certainty of karma to heart. When they experience something unwanted, they'll be quite relaxed about it. They'll know all that this is the ripening of a non-virtuous karmic imprint accumulated in the past. That's all. It's not such a big deal. This way, their patience protects their mind from getting upset or frustrated at an unwanted experience. Rather, they can even be positive about it, recognizing of this the large store of non-virtue on my mind. This is now one less. And because of my skillful way of responding or reacting, I'm not replacing this one non-virtuous imprint with a new one. Rather, my burden of non-virtue is being reduced.
안에 저기 안에 개발에 제부 동안 단대와 나서봐 준 그래서 개발을 해야지 세월시 송과 그래서 당한 저기 그냥 아주 치용오버 이게 마사본 답이야 될 때네 아주 세월 사고를 빼네 이게 쇼호시 마다베는 디테고 양자 쇼호기 요바딩 사고 그러와 안디네기 나서다바 안데라야 디네기 사본 쇼호시 답델야 추다 죄다 사다 차상 구요바 되면서 하고 그러와 얘네긴 나서요바 되래 이나 안주게 다 되네 야 쇼가 가시 첨부게다 가시 충충게다 단나서 중국으로 돼 지지도 디나래 쇼안주 섬다데 도도 마루진데 기요레 셈비게 디마도 셔라 하고 그러고 말와 야 내래 님주 시간 생직 바로 디나리아 직 쇼고 도도래 멤버 디나리 제 뉴버지 계기다 쇼고네 계기 뉴버 제지 가가셔 봐다 디네 줘봐도 건주기야 뉴비기 캐발레 제 디나리 뉴비기 캐발레 쇼고나 소용야도 조나 소용야다 디니 하고 두고 봐 내가 주디 하고 두고 말아 도도지 어디 디게신 디게스 맞답시고 봐 세상 디니 교수도 그런 주요 쇼래 디나데 뒤체다 제다 디니기 캐발레 내 제보다 소바 캐발요하지 자고로 봐다 디네 자다 디니기 디나시제 당하는 주기 지연에 하는 주기 라바라바 전부 다 하고 말 델레 심주 선리바데 10초보제 디리 콘주기 야가 하고도 규례제 디네들이 제보 된지 용거리 되는지 치료 되는 용거리 해야 되다 하고 두고 봐 디나시 당하는 주기다 나들레 개와서 받는 제부 용거리 해야 다 미개 와서 받는 제부 동안 용거리 해야 돼 하고 잠을마도 대한 마도 아니 디니기 디나데 미기위게 규되네 제부 차바되네 제부 나서 받는 연구여 봐서야지 나저기 싫어하고 두고 말마 이 디나시다 연구여 봐도 디세고로 빼려 마서네
has been made quite clear in this point. From a cause that is virtuous, happiness and happiness alone will result. And if that cause is slight, it will be a slight result. If the cause was powerful, immense cause, so too will the result be immense. And likewise with non-virtue. So this is what one needs to gain certainty in. But we should guard ourselves from merely leaving it at that. Yes, we know I need to do this and not do that, and it's just something that does not have a transformative impact on how we live our life, how we keeping our mind virtuous and not allowing it to come under the influence of the afflictions. We need to be more precise with our understanding so that it has a more transformative impact. For example, farmers and gardeners know they need to plant a specific seed to achieve a particular plant. And so this is, we can liken here to a general understanding. From virtue comes happiness, from non-virtue comes suffering. So this is widely understood and accepted amongst Buddhists. But if this is the level of understanding of the gardener or farmer, the crop that results is probably not going to match their expectations or their hopes. Whereas if the gardener or the farmer has relied on the knowledge acquired by botanists who have studied this particular plant well, they will understand what type of soil is required, the amount of warmth and moisture required, and at what time period. And with all this knowledge, the seeds that have been planted will ripen and grow, and the crop will be not only the desired crop, but abundant. So in this analogy, we can see the difference between a general understanding that if I want to have potatoes, I need to plant the right seeds for potatoes, and I'll have a field full of potatoes. If that's all that one knows, one may well end up utilizing the wrong soil, planting at the wrong time of year, and so forth. Whereas if one gathers knowledge and has understood this knowledge, and that knowledge impacts one's behavior, then one will have a field full of desired potatoes. So therefore, we need to not merely understand this presentation, but it needs to be integrated within us. We need to reflect well on this presentation so that it has an impact on how we live our lives. So of the four outlines in this general presentation on karma, that's the first, the certainty of karma. Then the second, the karma greatly increases. So yeah, we should understand this as being the karmic seed leads to a greatly increased karmic result. So from a small virtuous seed, great happiness can result. From a small non-virtuous seed, great suffering can result.
Nibane gewa le gewa chung le jan jibu gewa shindu chewa chung las le migewa chung le jan jibu dunga shindu chimbo jungwe nangi gyudegi pel jawani pel jawani chirugi gyude le medos.
Lama Tsongkhapa writes, even from a small virtuous action, there arises enormous happiness as its effect, while even from a small non-virtuous action, there arises enormous suffering as its effect. There is nothing among external causes and effects that resembles the increase of effects from internal causes.
gewa chung le jan jibu dewa shindu chewa chung las debu chung ge le and sabe kala chung shi sabe ne di gewa debu di and dewa and yun yungbu da shindu mongbu chewa chung yunggu re je da this one do.
The first part of the sentence presents that from even a small virtuous action, so this word action is just the English translation for the word karma. So from a small a virtuous karmic imprint can arise enormous happiness as its result.
Buku kiyan de kono buku de lakwa dusine niga dus tamde yore, dus te de yore chile. Chisan dat papa mangi di pe semte che che, dene dat buku di lakwa kiyan yuki che sha sampe du semte che, dene lakwa tsu tangarwa, dus na du, dina le serjam chita, dina serjam ni yore. Serjam china koyin sergi, ser yungu, zirwa tanga yungu cha yungu lo adina che serjam choko, adina ki lakwa re serjam re yore. 제자디 바바니게 두스 된지 두스 바바 파마니 수 된지 제 부 라고 하면 디나 세담 된 거라서 게디나 제자디 된지는 마 두시네 바바니도 빼지 뺀줘라서 빼하고 중얼 해서 그래.
There's a story that illustrates this of a child that was born to a family. And this infant, its hands were clasped tightly together in fists. And would not naturally open. So the parents were worried about their child. So they forced the child's hands open to try and get the child not just to abide with fists. When they opened the hands, they found a coin in the palm of each hand. And then if they took the coin, the child would make a fist again. And if they opened the hands again, would be another coin. And this process would just continue. The family were impoverished. And in this way, the infants help them tremendously.
And 디젤이야 부디야 첨부차야 되니 마 안지게 첨부차야 되니 부고롱 rapchungchiki dewa kyeche pamal yanga ane chigi rapchungchiki ziyashu ane pamegi yan chigiri esene rapchungchiki chigiri esene dush nang pamegi kelenche dene sangye chumdende zaliya chenche rapchung zhubiyondu dene ma ane rapchungchiki da dene ma rapchungchiki zhubiyondu kala deliya gilong mungbu yorwa ane gilong rere liya dunle cha rere cedu cha ma lakpa dushi ma shadu 세점 라 초니네 세점 리제 세점 니차고로 제상 기론 리리리리야 세점 니 도시네 도신시야라레서.
Later, when the child grew, the child requested their parents for permission to ordain, and the parents agreed. So the child ordained with the Buddha, and having ordained, prostrated to each of the monks present. And when prostrated before the monks, the child put their hands down, palms flat on the floor. And when the child stood up, 2 coins were there for each monk. And in this way, offerings were made to every monk.
언두시네 다콜 밍 세리라 그래서 세리익 밍들 세리익 그래서 데네진 그런도 두시네 데네 사유전 랍도 준지 데네 세델이야 자주면 저 톱송하지.
So this child was had the name of Serig, and in Tibetan, I don't know the Sanskrit, and later through striving went on to become an arhat.
데네 자다 상유점는 데네 기준자다 얀다 디기 라발에 세점 되다 되다 진치다 항상 제리야 상유점네 될이야 저거도 와지 데네기 라발에 총춘수 세점 되야다 봐나 알랍도 신 세델이야 자주미 저거 도바디 오늘 가리나스 야 상유점네 쉬버해지래 지와.
And as one would expect, the Buddha was asked, so what is the cause of this monk, Serig, being able to, for coins to keep appearing in his hands?
다디 주도 상해 점내 되게 마 가르쳐 버려서네. 다 상해 점내데 마베 녀려야 안 상해 서투프세데 점을 페어 서투프 상해 서투프. 네, 서투페어와 니 내가서 나 상해 서투프세데 상해 서투프당 그런게 안 코르 마직되게 되게 견디게 되는 수지 개보지기 되는 수지 아니야 수지 부야다 셀라부 되는 수지 셀라부고레스 디시가 말에 메다디 좀想녀마 상해 서투프세데 유비 갑라 디 상해 서투프 코나 제바 아니 마 개보lum비 개보디기 lum비 그 세세 부디 개보스가 말다 lum비 개보디기 두시네 되는 수지 셀라부 인고시 부고레스 상계 점대대나 상계 좀 녀마 상계 서투프세 줘라 상계 점대니 마베 녀야 초우주 상계 중요로 서투프 시작에 외송 세 중요 림바시도 지다 상계 서투프 된데가서 유비 갑라 안디니 상계다 그런 게 코라다 자좀 이 개론이 되는 수시에 개보 림비 개보디게 쇠지 부고래 해제 개보디 다다버디 기시고만 림비 개보디 기시고래 다들 보고 제일 지내 시유를 제가 녀라 뒤든 중을 녀마 상계 전에 마중 녀라 상계 갑라 상계이 룸비 개보디게 상계 되는 주 그런 거 긴데 제가 코라 제가 되는 주에 제가 수진 연구를 두선 수진 표고를 해제 다 상계 좀 되게 봐 루기도 송고할 때는 표고를 해서.
So in answer to this question, the Buddha recounted that a previous Buddha, again the Tibetan Sertup, he and his entourage were offered a meal by a king of the king of the particular kingdom that they happened to be in.
데네 프리비캅리아 미치요레스 교부치요레스 그런 게 배교부치 그런 걸 내가 갈래서는 니미를 힘돼서 제제 종제 니파 종니 니미를 소화기를 드는 기고를 했어요. 미교부치요레스 디 레가서 니미지 힘돼서 제 디파 종 니니파 종제네 디 어느 종제 디 라교디 우이디 그런 소화디 기고를 했어.
And at that time, there was a child or a person who was impoverished because the only income they had, they could gather was from cutting wood and selling that.
데니게 다 미교오디 데니게 제데 그런 이미지 신두스는 종제데 세점니라 요레신 종의 림바디 니라 요레스 제자다 그런 거 토대 상계다 아니 그런 코르다 제바 바게보디 데니 쉬제 수지 그배 지시우지 개체모지도 그런 배 지수 일하체 배 맞아 야고래 선배 지수 일하시우제 당한 미교오래 다 고시 데니게 고갑라 마송 제자 디링당 하나야 세점니를 그 신종의 세점니를 교대다 한 상계를 풀기스는 대바진이야 풀어야 되잖아.
So this poor person, this woodcutter, he saw that the king was offering a meal to the Buddha of that time and a large entourage, and sincerely from his heart rejoiced in what the king was doing, and the king's great fortune to be able to do this. And there's this person being impoverished, all that he had were 2 coins, which is what he had earned from selling wood. And this then he offered with this mind of deep faith to the Buddha.
재산 데니게 교워 세점이 신종의 세점이 디 상기를 푸 상기 기들이 푸바데 상기단 기는 남게 시에전 두면나 재산 디미디다 시신에다데 마다데 부충충 라바 세점 여긴 기현디 디미디를 해제다 데니게 미디 데니게 도시네 아니 제네 자주마 토에디 미디 니마 데니스 중월에 재산 선남 가르사 바르세네 코에디니 디가블이야 코롱 교보제가 maybe 가블이야 신종에게 세점니 육콜 부여에게 충충 세점니마도요 말레스 디상일의 푸바레스 디기 제부 규디다 세점니마도 그 규충충레데 디기 제부데다 세델이야 코라 디기에 코롱이야 세점 규메치바 중에 코롱 파마다 데술레 판도 좋아다 아니 겐들레 푸야라와 아니 디기 안지게 아 코롱 세델이야 랍도 중에 자신을 좀 토바레스 제부 재산 디기 세점니 교육갑려야 아니 상계래 대바제 규디 세점니마도 푸요마데 디 제부데 니게 아니 개와 어떻게서 첨부시고 중화래 세디 배선로 디송거다 세점 무시 재산 제공물이라서 세점 레레는 이게 세점 파말이야 세점 골라게디네 세점 규매체가 준 파말 제여봐 아니 긴도인데 푸여여봐 아니 잡도 중요 고가브라봐 된 잡도 중에 자주메 저거 토바래 저 제부 차상 되니게 제부 치부지라고 알았어 제부 비로 송도.
This then, the Buddha recounted, was the karmic cause for just what this monk had achieved in this life. So because he made this offering, despite being impoverished, he made the offering that he could with a mind of deep faith and joy. The karmic result that then came wasn't merely that coins kept appearing in his hands, but that he was able to ordain again, and that his training went so well that he became an arhat. So the karmic result was not only that the coins appeared in his hand, but that he was able to meet the Dharma, have deep faith, ordain, and his practice went well, leading to becoming an arhat.
개와 춘춘 주변에 디 제부 신도 첨부 용하대 되는 시에서 나들이야 디긴 로지도 망고 중요로 와다 그런 게미 푸에데다데 배선로 샤야디 푸에데레 세점니마도 푸요 말레스 제나 세점니 푸에 kiến 디게다 세점 망고 슈중으로 와다 디 제부 세점 망고 중요하다 랍도 중요하다 되니게 자주면 되고도 해 중요 제부 첨부 중요하래서 송거로 와 난 디치부점 예레베선 내가 말와다 이니고 그런 대피비가래 대바 요래 아니 지 상계래 대바체다 안 상계야 시내 상계기 튜머나야다 대mol라야다 되는 차상계다 튕겨요 폰소바데 차고로 와 나다 배선로지 부여라 충충 지 세점니마도 부여 말데 이내 제부 먹고 싶으면 정도와 세대 제사데 개와 충충 제베네 제부 받으면 중요해 중국어를 해야지.
From this story, what the story recounts is what we see in the first line. Even from a small virtuous action, there arises enormous happiness as its effect. So the small action was that of offering 2 coins. But what amplified this cause to a great result is that in terms of this particular person's material capacity, he offered to the very limit of what was his capacity. He didn't just offer a small portion of what he had in excess that day, but he offered all that he could. And it wasn't only about the size of the offering that he made in relation to his capacity, but the quality of mind with which he made that offering. Deep and sincere faith in the Buddha and the ordained Sangha, as well as a mind of great joy in having this opportunity, and then his prayers and dedications that followed, his prayers with which he made the offering and his dedication that followed. So there were these amplifying conditions that went together with the offering that led to this great result. It wasn't merely giving 2 coins.
되니게 송거다 donala 가르 송거에서네 제상 소식에다 띵에디 충충지마도 미도 제메지미도 제부 친구용 요말선 비게 이제 샤요 말해서 딱 소식이 충충지네 소식이 지게 삼노 야고 땅제 되니 제바이네 제부 친구용 거래서 그래 배낭하는 저게 미에 저거도제 강가 체대비게 강가 시우 체대게 값이야 소식이 배네 배지콜이야 니제게 누이닝제 다 거강 세고 세베 삼노다네 되니게 니제 삼다 소수게다 칼라로지 뒤직 댄베네 칼라직 뒤직 잡에네 댄 바제베네 제상 파셔들이야 강아 변동 저것도 시에기 소래 교구요 받아 소수게 잠니지게 제바자 제딜을 바제딜을 칼라 뒤직마도 돼요 말 이내야 니기 뭐하는 되고 아니 미션이야 판도 시행기 소교비기 소교바다 저것도 도비 강을 세와 아니 소식이 잠니지 개발자 되게 견진에 뭐하는데 되니기 제 소수의 롱제 받는 거야 용거리에서 제가 되니기 안 되네 니멤비랑 아주 지게 라마다 상계단 되네려 지 되니기 충충이마도 표에 당하서 되니기 충충 표면도 반응이 오면서 선배 삼다지 지겨라 니멤베지 충충을 지내 소수기 대비군이나 하나씩 팬베슨 표에나 되니 충충 표에나 니게 견진에는 상계단 대속에 시여도 아니 대보 대화치 모르게 해야지 어디네에서 다 가젤에 만족이 그시 디니엘 슈바는 개와 충충이는 주고래 해야지 너나디 송고 와다.
The meaning to take from this is perhaps twofold. Firstly, do not limit yourself by thinking, oh, there's nothing that I can do. Who am I? I'm such a nobody. What difference can I make? This way of thinking is deeply flawed. There is so much that can be done. And the second thing to take away is how one engages makes an immense difference. So, for example, if you encounter someone who's impoverished and suffering from hunger, it's quite normal for compassion to arise. But act under that compassion. When the compassion arises within you, do something to help. Even if all you can afford is to help them with a single meal, do that. It's not, in terms of financial terms, a big offering, but you are at least helping. And do so with this full expression of the mind of compassion that has arisen within you. Don't allow critical thoughts towards the person that you're offering, or negative thoughts towards yourself, oh, this is all I can do. Rather, with a joyous mind of love and compassion, give to them. Give to them with tenderness and care. Give to them with joy at this opportunity of being able to do so. And in this way, by acting skillfully, a powerful result will come. And so this is very different from just giving food, but you take care with the quality of mind with which you give. Likewise, when making offerings to the Buddhas or to one's teachers, then even if one is just making a small offering, do so with clear intent. Cultivate a powerful, virtuous motivation. And in this way, by offering skillfully, a greatly enhanced result will follow.
야 미교실에 소소게 잘라 예시라서 그 잘라 먹고지때 조세다 구비하다 되게 예시다 하야로 뇌시라서 먹고시 제베네 다 제디가 소소야 어디 나라는 먹고등이 강보를 샤사라고 믿는 나라야 배주시라면 샤나 강보를 지 사제 쇼가 딜리콜 제샤와서 된 제베네 제를 빼펀치미 제버려되네 pension 주주 마도인 거 말고 그래서 군로들이야 샘 딩교 콜 펜섬 되는 제 책을 말로 그래서 소소야 강아 체제들 바딜레 바 지저와서 삼다에 디 되네래 디나시 지게 군라로다 되네게 지지라나 소소샤 지차선데 강아도디 딜레야도 유아지 콤바디오 피샤와서 표현에 되네 배를 중심하대요 말에 첨보를 표현해. that's 닝이 원해라다 되네게 지금 콤바디오 표현에 대 콤바디오와 시샤진들라 최고 표현에 따도냐에 배야고 현 수남자에 판도시 용거에서 삼다 표현에 아직 수남 첨보사 제거 제자디 저 제대한 민이 진비 냠는 세야디 做金币在了啥那个嘛，做什么当他了啥那个在，那么你那个就继续我了，就在地方。
And just to really drive this point home, that take care of your motivation behind your virtuous endeavors, because it makes such a difference to the karmic result that will follow. So if you're looking around your house and you're thinking, really, I've just too many possessions, I need to get rid of some of this clutter. And then you maybe give it to an op shop, or you know someone who's impoverished and you give it to them. This is good to do, but take care of that motivation. Because really from such an act done in this way, not much benefit, not much karmic benefit will come. Even if you're giving it to someone who desperately needs it, and they receiving great benefit from what you're doing, the karmic cause you are creating will be weak. Why? You're mainly doing so from self-interest. You're decluttering, you're making some space in your home, maybe you want to buy something new. And likewise, if one looks at one's shrine and thinks, oh, I have too many statues or whatever, I know I'll give it to the monastery. Then, again, generally we'd say, oh, it's very good, you're offering statues to the monastery. But look at your motivation. Because when the motivation is one of self-interest, it's not that one wouldn't say it's not an act of generosity, but it's not really much of an act of generosity. Because what defines an act as being generous or not is not so much about what is being given, but primarily about the motivation behind the giving. Hence, in the first illustration, where you're really just clearing out your house, perhaps to buy some new things, that's about self-interest. It's not so much about generosity. So therefore, take care of your motivation because of the difference it makes to the karmic results.
아니 냠는 지겐디 리고래 다 콘소데 빼야고래 콘소미 개외 냠내지 곰 잡진데 빼야고르와 선배다 콘소 냠는 제지 야고 차바는 콘소기 미모부지리에 판도하지 미 시행기 강하세야래 판도 침목게 주투걸 빼야고래 되는 상에 되려야 안지게 디 콘소리 판도 인자다 디 튕길래 차치도 내용에 ля가제라 배 야구인 배 야구에 선배 소소에 가고 보면다 디체도 다 건축이 냠내제 80점 방부질에 판도형하게 되었다 이 선배 당도 삼로 디네스타제 제아지기 다나 야가려베네 제디 배 파연 예시 보사야 차고 저자디 저기 아지 멤비게다 멤비 소소기 나지 레홍지나 내가 조에네 내가 가와 조에네 소소기 진다도 그런지 그 펜내야 고래 선배 콜리 펜멍이 내가 제 펜도 용하지 거기 강아서야 돼 디기 주는 빼야 고래 선배게 삼다쟁이 될 펜도 치료 인선배 삼다제 내가 조에네 스쿨로 되는 스타반네 그것에 저 소소기 개와사 용으래 디 멤비 땅에 내가 콜다지 링고 땅에 라지라 지긴 선배 삼다베나야 디 개와스카이사야 말 내가 지바래데 개와사야 가요 말 대체도 군로리아 되니게 삼다 펜베 삼다지 내가 조셔바이나 아니 소수기 아니 된다 주야 라래야 돼 내가 라래야 돼 라고와 디 강라 소수기 펜베 삼류 군에 라제 즉 군로 깨네 레와자 펜베 삼 군로 그런 개와차돼요 그래서 니네서 내가 레디칼에 개와 념도 용도야지 내가 개와에 주투바 아니 온도셔야지 근데 도착하고 되네 자당 안 주기 되네 지도가다 내가 뒤에 즉 정보로 내도 거래 그 펜베스임기 즉 내가 내나 정보리 펜베스임기 내가 말하는 되네 내가 뒤에 야구 맞아봐다 안지 됐어 고하다야라서 봐다 용시 바로와 되네 자 소수게다 개위 삼로 단하 돈에 즉게 샤다쇼 가래 제베나 소수 제베나 삼로 단하 돈 주변에 개화사에 받자기도 와
what I want you to take from this is not, from this presentation on karma, it's not merely this is must abandon non-virtue and accumulate virtue, but to take this much deeper, to understand that the attitude with which I engage in virtuous activities is incredibly important. It's the most important aspect. So when you set yourself on, I'm going to do something virtuous, make sure you take the time to cultivate an appropriate motivation. So I know many of you help Atisha Center in various ways. Some may give of their time and share their skills and talents. Others may give financially. However you help, this is needed and is beneficial. So that you do this is fabulous. But I encourage you to look at your motivation. Take that time to cultivate an appropriate motivation and engage with such a motivation. So whatever role you play here, whether it is merely as sitting in the audience and thereby making it possible that teachings are given, do so with a virtuous motivation. Recognize just what a Dharma center is. And what the Dharma center primarily is a place where people can learn about the causes that will lead to liberation, and where they have the opportunity to integrate those causes. So to hear teachings and to reflect on the teachings. Everything else are the various activities that make that core function possible. So wherever you contribute, again, whether it's only sitting in teachings, or whether it's volunteering in some way or giving financial assistance, however it may be, do so with a clear recognition that I am contributing to help people gain freedom from suffering. And with such a motivation, a far greater karmic result will follow. So therefore, when one comes to teachings, for example, one does so with the motivation that independence on my presence, teachings will be given. I, amongst other students, enable the opportunity for teachings to come. May we all benefit, and through our spiritual development, may all beings benefit. And think in this way, generate joy, and then engage. And this then is of course the case with one's volunteering aspects or donations. Generate a clear understanding of why you are doing this, the benefit that will follow, and do so then with a joyous mind. Because then the same activity leads to so much merit being accumulated. And this way of thinking, take to other aspects of your life. So take your regular employment. Whatever one is doing, generate a virtuous motivation. So in some forms of employment, it's very clear, my work directly helps someone. But for most forms of employment, this may not be so clear. But nevertheless, you have work colleagues, you have people who rely on what you're doing, even if it's just administration. It is required, it is needed. You have people who are relying on you, and you have people around you, your colleagues, your customers, whomever it may be. Generate a motivation that through whatever you do, may benefit only come. And through whoever I connect with, may I bring benefit into their lives now and in lives to come. So in this way, your regular daily activities can lead to the accumulation of extensive merit. And this then means we transform how we live our life into just from a life where one is just going through the motions of trying to gain experiences of pleasure and overcome experiences of suffering, to actually living a life of great meaning, a life where we accumulate the causes that will lead to lasting happiness for ourselves and others. So in particular, with overtly meritorious activities such as hearing teachings, doing your own meditation and so forth, generate a powerful motivation. But skillfully do so in other activities as well, because with a virtuous motivation, all that you do then can and will lead to virtue. Do this, and in this way, your life will be greatly meritorious. It will be a life of real value, of real meaning. So then thank you. We can conclude there for this morning. If there are questions, then please feel free to ask. Then thank you. Enjoy your lunch.